The next time you call someone sanguine or say you're feeling melancholy, you're diagnosing them using a medical theory over 2,000 years old. For more than a millennium, the greatest physicians on earth believed your health came down to 4 fluids inside your body. How did one theory control medicine from ancient Rome to the Enlightenment and leave fingerprints all over the English language? To understand where these words come from, we need to go back to a physician in the Roman Empire named Galen. Writing in Greek around 170 CE, Galen became the principal medical authority for centuries. He didn't invent the system. Earlier Hippocratic writers had sketched it out, but Galen organized it into a complete framework. At its center sat 4 bodily fluids called humors. A humor, in the medical sense, meant a fluid believed to shape both your health and your personality. Here's the system. 4 humors, each mapped to one of the 4 classical elements, each defined by a pair of qualities. Yellow bile corresponds to fire, hot and dry. Blood corresponds to air, hot and wet. Phlegm corresponds to water, cold and wet. A black bile corresponds to earth, cold and dry. Each humor also aligns with a season: summer for yellow bile, spring for blood, winter for phlegm, autumn for black bile. The logic is elegant. Health equals balance among all 4. Disease means one humor has grown too dominant, and every person carries a natural lean toward one humor, the temperament. That word temperament originally meant your specific mixture of humors. Each temperament came with a distinct personality profile. The choleric person, dominated by yellow bile, was ambitious, decisive, quick to anger. Think of a battlefield commander. The sanguine person, dominated by blood, was optimistic, social, a risk-taker, the life of the party. The phlegmatic person, dominated by phlegm, was calm, reliable, sometimes sluggish, a steady hand in a crisis. And the melancholic person, dominated by black bile, was thoughtful, analytical, prone to sadness. The brooding poet. And these weren't just personality types, they were medical diagnoses. Too much yellow bile didn't just make you irritable, it gave you fevers and digestive problems. The body and the mind were one system, and the language stuck. Take the word melancholy. It comes directly from the Greek. Melan, meaning black, plus choler, meaning bile. Melancholia literally means black bile, the humor associated with sadness and deep thought. Choleric comes from choler, yellow bile. Sanguine comes from the Latin sanguis, blood. Phlegmatic comes straight from phlegm. Even the phrase good humor originally meant a healthy balance of fluids. These words are fossils of a medical theory embedded in modern English. Galen gave the medieval world its medical playbook, but the person who turned that playbook into the definitive textbook lived 800 years later and 1,000 miles to the east. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, was born in 980 in what is now Uzbekistan. He was a Persian polymath, physician, philosopher, logician, musicologist. In 1025, he completed the Canon of Medicine, an encyclopedic work that synthesized Galen's Greek framework with far more detailed clinical observation than anything before it. The Canon didn't just repeat Galen. Avicenna added systematic descriptions of diseases, cataloged drug interactions, and explored the concept of contagion. The book's journey tells the story of knowledge itself. Hippocratic ideas born in Greece around 400 BCE traveled to Galen in Rome. During the Islamic Golden Age, scholars in Baghdad translated those Greek texts into Arabic. Avicenna synthesized them in 1025. Then in the 12th century, translators in Toledo, Spain rendered the Canon into Latin. European medical schools, Bologna, Montpellier, Paris, adopted it as their standard text. It remained in use for roughly 700 years. That's longer than the entire history of the United States. So how did humoral medicine work in practice? The physician's most important tool was uroscopy. The examination of urine. A doctor would collect a patient's urine in a special glass flask called a macula, hold it up to the light, and read it like a diagnostic manual. The color indicated which humor dominated. Pale and watery suggested excess phlegm. Dark and concentrated pointed to an excess of bile. Cloudiness revealed the degree of imbalance. Sediment hinted at a type of disease. Some physicians even assessed smell and taste. The urine flask became so iconic that in medieval and Renaissance paintings, you can identify a doctor specifically by the small flask he holds. It was the stethoscope of its era. Humoral theory's emphasis on balance wasn't unique to the West. Chinese medicine organized health around the equilibrium of yin and yang and the flow of qi. Indian Ayurvedic medicine built its system around three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, each linked to elements and personality types, just like the humors. These civilizations developed these frameworks largely independently. The pattern reveals a deep human intuition. Health is harmony, and disease is disruption of that harmony. Humoral theory was eventually replaced, but was it useless? Not exactly. The humors weren't correct in a modern biomedical sense. No fluid called black bile exists, yet the framework accomplished something powerful. It gave physicians a systematic, internally consistent model for diagnosis and treatment. And the core question humoral doctors asked, what does balance mean in the body? Is the same question modern medicine still asks. Hormonal balance, gut microbiome equilibrium, homeostasis, the vocabulary changed, the underlying principle didn't. One more thing worth noting, humoral theory didn't vanish overnight. When modern medicine arrived, the decline stretched across the 17th and 18th centuries. Humoral thinking coexisted with emerging anatomy, chemistry, and eventually germ theory for generations. The transition was gradual, more like a slow tide going out than a light switch flipping off. And as those English words prove, the concepts never fully disappeared. Three things to remember. First, four humors mapped to four elements created a unified system where health meant balance, and it dominated medicine for over 1,000 years. Second, Avicenna's Canon of Medicine served as the world's standard medical textbook for roughly 700 years. Third, every time you say melancholy, choleric, sanguine, or phlegmatic, humoral theory lives on in your language. The best doctors in the world believed your health came down to four fluids. They were wrong about the fluids, but they were right that the body craves balance.